Back in April 2024, I got activated for a mission that doesn't officially exist. The call came at 3:17 a.m. on April 3rd. I was already awake. Insomnia had been my companion since my daughter's funeral. I sat in my kitchen drinking bourbon that wasn't helping when my secure phone buzzed with a priority alert. The voice gave me 2 hours to pack, full tactical gear, cosmic clearance. That's the classification level above top secret. The kind that means you're dealing with things that could cause mass panic if they got out. I'm Captain James Reeves, 14 years in Army intelligence, specializing in psychological operations and advanced interrogation methods. The kind that doesn't go into official records. The kind that takes place in rooms with no windows and installations that don't exist on any map. I was stationed at Fort Bragg, living in a rental house with furniture my ex-wife left behind. Angela left 2 years ago. She said she couldn't live with a ghost anymore. That's what I'd become after our daughter Emma died. She had leukemia. She was 7 years old. After Emma, I stopped believing in a lot of things. I grew up Catholic, went to Mass every Sunday with my grandmother in Boston, even considered the priesthood for about 5 minutes when I was 17. But after Emma, I couldn't even look at a church without feeling this hollowing rage. So when that call came, I was already numb, already empty, already the perfect candidate for whatever nightmare they needed someone to face. The black SUV arrived exactly at 5:20 a.m., tinted windows so dark they looked like solid metal. The driver was military, I could tell by the posture, but wearing civilian clothes. Woman in the passenger seat. Also civilian clothes, also obviously military. Neither of them spoke. I packed on autopilot. Combat fatigues, tactical vest, sidearm, 3 days of clothes, toiletries. My hands moved through the routine while my brain tried to catch up. After about 15 minutes in the SUV, the woman turned around and handed me a black hood. Her voice was flat, professional, non-negotiable. Put it on. I'd been through SEER training. I knew what hoods meant, but I also knew that orders were orders. Under the hood, I lost all sense of direction. The SUV turned multiple times. The sound changed as we moved from asphalt to concrete to what might have been gravel. At some point, we stopped. I heard the distinctive sound of a cargo aircraft, and they walked me up a ramp. The flight lasted hours. I dozed at some point, which probably says something about how numb I'd become to weird situations. When we landed and they walked me to another vehicle, I could tell from the heat and the particular quality of silence that we were in a desert. Probably Nevada or New Mexico. Another hour of driving, mostly underground from the echoing quality of the sound. The vehicle stopped and someone finally removed the hood. The light was harsh and clinical. We were in what looked like an underground parking structure, but wrong. Too clean, too modern, too expensive for government work. The walls were some kind of polished black material that seemed to absorb light. The ceiling was at least 30 feet high. There were cameras everywhere, little red lights blinking in systematic patterns. A man in his 50s approached me, tall, gray hair, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my car. He had the look of someone who'd spent his career in intelligence agencies. That particular combination of authority and paranoia, Captain Reeves, he said without offering a handshake. I'm Director Thomas Kane. You're gonna follow me. Standard operational security applies. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't ask questions. Don't look at anything twice. If you see something you don't understand, forget it immediately. Are we clear? Crystal, sir. He led me through a security checkpoint that made Taze look like a joke. Retinal scan, fingerprint, full body scanner, DNA swab, then through a series of corridors that descended deeper underground. The walls changed from that black material to something that looked almost like liquid metal. The temperature dropped noticeably with each level. We passed rooms with frosted glass windows. Behind one of them, I heard something that made every nerve in my body fire at once. It wasn't quite human. It wasn't quite animal. It was something in between, something fundamentally wrong. Kane didn't even slow down, just kept walking in his expensive shoes, the sound echoing off those strange walls. We stopped at a heavy blast door. Kane placed his hand on a biometric scanner, then turned to look at me. His expression was hard to read. Concern, maybe, or warning. Captain, what you're about to see is going to challenge your understanding of reality. You were selected because your psychological profile indicates high resilience to cognitive stress. You've also experienced significant personal trauma, which paradoxically makes you more stable for this kind of assignment than someone who hasn't been through hell. He paused. You also have no current religious affiliation. That makes you safer for this than someone with strong faith. We've had incidents with the religiously devout. My stomach tightened. What kind of incidents? The kind where belief systems collapse under the weight of what they've seen. He pressed his palm to the scanner again. The door hissed open. When you walk through this door, Captain, your life divides into before and after. There's no going back to before. Do you understand? But I said yes anyway. The room was circular, maybe 50 feet across, with a domed ceiling that curved up into shadows. The walls were lined with equipment I didn't recognize. Screens showing data streams that looked more like art than science. There were at least 20 people in white lab coats working at terminals, but all of that registered only peripherally, because in the center of the room was a cylindrical field of shimmering blue energy about 15 feet tall and 8 feet wide. And inside that field, suspended a few feet off the ground, was something that made my brain skip like a scratched record. It wasn't human, it was roughly humanoid, 2 arms, 2 legs, a head-like structure, but the proportions were wrong in a way that triggered every uncanny valley instinct I had. The limbs were too long, jointed in too many places. The skin, if you could call it skin, shifted between textures, sometimes smooth like obsidian, sometimes rough like stone, sometimes almost transparent where you could see things moving underneath that might have been organs or might have been something else entirely. The head was too large. The face had features that suggested a face, 2 eyes, something like a nose, a mouth, but arranged just wrong enough to make my stomach turn. And the eyes. God, the eyes were the worst part. They were huge, taking up maybe a third of the face, and they were completely black, not like ink, like space, like looking into a well that went down forever. And those eyes were looking directly at me. My knees started to give out. Someone caught my arm. One of the technicians in a lab coat. Kane was beside me, his voice steady and professional. Captain Reeves, meet subject Zeta. We need you to make it talk. I'm going to be straight with you. When I first saw that thing in the containment field, every piece of training I had just evaporated. You know how sometimes you see something so far outside your frame of reference that your brain just stops? That's what happened. I stood there being held up by some technician because my legs had forgotten how to work, and I just stared. Director Kane was talking, explaining something about protocols and safety measures, but his voice sounded like it was coming from the other end of a long tunnel. All I could process was that thing floating in the blue light, watching me with eyes that didn't blink in any human rhythm. I think I said something really intelligent like, "What in the absolute hell is that?" Kane's response wasn't reassuring. "That's what we're trying to determine, Captain." They led me to the briefing room adjacent to the containment chamber. Long table, too many serious faces. Military brass I didn't recognize, scientists who looked like they hadn't slept in weeks, and a couple of people in dark suits who had that distinctive federal agent energy. A 3-star general whose name patch read Harrison started the briefing. His hands weren't quite steady as he opened the folder in front of him. Captain Reeves, what you're about to hear is classified at a level that officially doesn't exist. The entity you just saw has been in our custody for 11 weeks. In that time, it has spoken exactly 73 words, all of them either insults or refusals to cooperate. He looked up at me. We've tried everything. Standard interrogation, enhanced techniques, isolation, sensory manipulation, even attempted mathematical communication. Nothing works. It speaks English, which is remarkable in itself, but refuses to provide any substantive information. One of the scientists jumped in. Young guy, maybe 30, with that particular nervousness of someone who'd seen too much. The entity displays capabilities that violate known physics. It can manipulate electromagnetic fields through what appears to be thought alone. It doesn't eat, doesn't drink, shows no need for sleep. Cellular analysis is inconclusive because its cells, if we can call them that, operate on principles we don't understand. He pulled up images on a screen. Microscope slides showing structures that looked organic but wrong. Geometry that hurt to look at. We believe it's not from Earth, obviously, but more than that, we're not sure it's from our reality in the conventional sense. Some of our theoretical physicists think it might be extra-dimensional rather than extraterrestrial. It exists partially in dimensions we can't perceive. 11 weeks ago, there was an incident at a research facility in Utah, classified above your clearance. The short version is we were conducting experiments with high-energy particle physics, attempting to probe the structure of space-time itself. Or right, depending on your perspective. He gestured toward the containment chamber. We created an aperture, a doorway, and something came through. That thing, along with two others. The other two died within hours of arrival, cellular collapse at the molecular level. This one adapted. It's been stable since day 6. General Harrison leaned forward. Captain, your record shows exceptional success in extracting information from unwilling subjects. 96% success rate. Or you've broken trained enemy combatants, intelligence officers, individuals specifically prepared to resist interrogation. He chose his words carefully, but more importantly, your psychological profile indicates high tolerance for existential shock. Most personnel who've spent extended time in that containment room have experienced severe psychological distress, panic attacks, dissociative episodes, loss of affect. One of our chaplains had to be removed from the facility entirely. He paused. We're hoping that someone who's already experienced significant trauma, someone who's already looked into the abyss, will be more resistant to whatever effect this thing has on people. You're telling me we ripped open reality and pulled something through, something from another dimension, and you want me to have a chat with it? The scientist nodded enthusiastically. Essentially, yes, though ripped is somewhat dramatic. We created a controlled aperture lasting approximately 1.8 seconds. What came through was not intentional, but it has given us an unprecedented opportunity for contact with non-human intelligence, potentially extra-dimensional intelligence. And it speaks English, I said slowly. That doesn't strike anyone as suspicious? Kane's expression didn't change. Extremely suspicious. One theory is that it's reading our minds, extracting language from our thoughts. Another is that language, symbolic communication, is somehow universal across dimensional barriers. A third theory is that it's been observing humanity for far longer than 11 weeks and learned our languages long ago. He paused. All three possibilities are equally disturbing in their own ways. They gave me an hour to review the intelligence they'd gathered. Video footage of the entity in its containment field. Audio recordings of those 73 words, spoken in a voice that resonated in frequencies that made my teeth ache. You are insects. There were medical reports too, but they read like bad science fiction. Non-Euclidean biological architecture, quantum entangled cellular structures, multidimensional consciousness anchored in tertiary space-time. I was an interrogator, not a physicist. I dealt in psychology, body language, finding pressure points in the human psyche. How the hell was any of that supposed to work on something that wasn't human? But here's what military training does. It teaches you to compartmentalize, to put fear and confusion in a box and focus on the mission. So that's what I did. Interrogation is about wrapper, leverage, and motivation. This thing spoke English, which meant it could communicate. It refused to communicate, which meant it had reasons. Find the reasons. Find the leverage. I'd done it 1,000 times with human subjects. The principles might be universal. When Kane came to get me, I stood up. Ready? He studied my face for a moment. You're never ready for this, Captain. But you're as prepared as anyone can be. Back in the containment room, a technician handed me a wireless headset. Audio quality is better than shouting through the field. It can hear you clearly. Whether it responds is another matter. Stepped up to the containment field. Close. I could feel the static electricity making the hair on my arms stand up, and the entity was even more disturbing at this range. The skin shifted constantly. Obsidian smooth, then rough like volcanic rock, then almost translucent. The hands had 6 fingers each, long and precise, moving with a fluidity that didn't seem biological. And at the tip of each finger was something that looked like a claw, but also like a surgical instrument. Edges that caught the light in ways that suggested they were sharper than anything humans had ever made. The eyes locked onto mine. And I felt it, not physically, but somewhere deeper, like it was reading something written on my soul. I cleared my throat. I'm Captain James Reeves. I'm here to talk with you. Nothing. It just floated there, arms hanging loose, head tilted slightly like a bird examining something curious, but ultimately unimportant. I tried again. We understand you've been uncooperative with my colleagues. I'm hoping we can change that. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to understand. Still nothing. Not even a flicker of reaction. One of the scientists whispered behind me, ignores you for hours. Then suddenly says something cryptic and goes silent again, but I saw something the scientist didn't. A micro-movement. When I said my name, the thing's head shifted maybe a millimeter. It was listening, it just didn't care. So I pulled up a chair and sat down directly in front of the containment field. If it wanted to play the silence game, I'd been trained by the best. I once sat across from a Hezbollah commander for 8 hours without saying a word, just maintaining eye contact until he cracked. But as the minutes stretched into an hour, I started to realize something. This wasn't human psychology. Silence didn't make it uncomfortable. It didn't need to fill dead air. It was just there, existing, looking at me with those bottomless eyes. And in the back of my mind, a thought formed that I tried to suppress. You'll... really, really old. And it thinks we're nothing. That thought should have scared me. Instead, it made me angry. I leaned forward. You know what? You're right. We probably are primitives compared to you. But you're the one in the cage, and I'm the one with the key. So maybe you're not as superior as you think. For the first time, it spoke. The mouth didn't move right. The words seemed to form in the air itself, resonating in frequencies I felt in my chest. The cage is an illusion to make you feel safe. The point to the crowd in the my cause. The cage isn't a leave I choose to be. When I choose to leave, in I cast to squeeze to leave, or your technology cannot hold me. Your weapons cannot harm me. I am speaking to you now only because your arrogance is amusing. Every screen in the room flickered. The lights dimmed, and I felt pressure in my head like the beginning of a massive headache. Reeves, are you okay? Your vitals just spiked, but I couldn't look away from those eyes, because for the first time since Emma died, I felt something other than numbness. I felt absolutely terrified, and somehow that made me feel alive. Let me describe this thing properly, because you need to understand what I was dealing with. Every alien movie you've ever seen, throw it out. This wasn't like that. The entity was roughly 7.5 feet tall when it stood upright, which it rarely did. Most of the time, it just floated in that containment field in a sitting position, legs crossed in a way that would have shattered a human's pelvis. The body was slender, almost skeletal, but not in a malnourished way, more like it was engineered with absolute efficiency. No wasted mass. The skin, I keep calling it skin, but that's not quite right, shifted constantly. One moment it looked like polished black glass, reflecting the containment field's light in strange angles. The next it was rough and porous like lava rock. Sometimes it became almost translucent, and I could see geometric patterns moving underneath, pulsing with a light that wasn't quite light. Looking at it directly for too long made my eyes water. But those eyes. Keep coming back to the eyes because they're what I still see when I close my own. Huge, taking up maybe a third of the face, completely black, but not like ink, like deep space. If all the stars had been erased, and deep in that darkness, patterns moved, lights that flickered on and off in sequences that almost seemed like they meant something. When it looked at you, really looked at you, you felt it. Not physically, but somewhere primal, like it was reading your source code. I took a breath and decided to start with basics. Do you have a name? For a long moment, I thought it would ignore me. Then that voice came again, resonating in frequencies that made my feelings ache. Names are limitations your species uses because you cannot perceive identity in any meaningful way. You may call me whatever allows your primitive cognition to process my existence, condescending right out of the gate. I dealt with arrogant subjects before. The key was not to rise to it. All right, they've designated you Subject Zeta. I'll call you that unless you prefer something else. A pause. Acceptable. Irrelevant, but acceptable. I leaned forward slightly. Zeta, can you tell me where you came from? The entity's 6-fingered hands flexed in that disturbing fluid motion. I came from where I was. I am now where I am. Your question assumes linear progression through space that does not apply to me. I fought the urge to sigh. Okay, let me rephrase. Before you arrived at this facility, where were you? I was adjacent. I was perpendicular. I was in the spaces between your spaces. You created a door, crude, violent ripping of reality. I entered because the door pulled me with force you cannot comprehend. Perhaps you should ask where you brought me from, not where I came from. More words than it had given anyone in 11 weeks. I felt a small surge of progress. Or you're saying we pulled you here against your will. You didn't come intentionally. The entity made a sound like glass shattering in slow motion. The concept of displeasure does not adequately describe my state. But I am also curious. You are so very small, so very brief, so convinced of your importance. It is almost endearing, like watching insects build colonies not knowing winter comes. My jaw tightened. You say we're small and brief, but we're the ones who figured out how to tear through dimensions. That doesn't sound primitive to me. The entity went very still, and that stillness was somehow worse than movement. You did not tear through dimensions through understanding. You tore through them through blind violence, like a child swinging a hammer in a crystal shop. You do not understand what you did. You do not understand what could have come through instead of me. You do not understand that every moment that door was open, you invited extinction. But you are proud of this. This is why you are primitives. The lights flickered behind me. We probably seem very limited from your perspective, but we're trying to learn. That's why I'm here. Can you help me understand? The entity's mouth opened slightly, revealing those crystalline structures inside. You want me to help you understand? Very well. I will use small words. You are meat puppets animated by electrical impulses. You exist for a breath, a blink, then you stop. You think you are aware because you can form symbols, but your awareness is to true consciousness as a candle is to a star. My patience was starting to wear thin. I stood up, walked a few steps away, then turned back. You know what? Maybe we are primitives. Maybe we don't understand the universe the way you do. But here's what I understand. You've been in that field for 11 weeks. 11 weeks and you haven't left. So either you're lying about your abilities, or there's a reason you're staying. Which is it? Something flickered in those black eyes. Maybe surprise. You are partially correct. I am here because leaving would require energy that would destroy this facility and everything within a 5-mile radius. I stay because I choose not to commit such destruction. It paused. Yet, note that word, human. Yet. It pressed one hand against the containment field. Blue-white electricity arced across the barrier, making every computer briefly glitch. But your assumption that I need a reason to stay beyond my own amusement is flawed. I am observing you, the scientists who study me, the soldiers who guard me, the politicians who argue about me. You are all convinced that you matter. I am staying to watch you realize you do not. I felt my hands ball into fists. This thing was getting under my skin, and that was exactly what it wanted. Or you want to know what I think? I stepped close to the field again. I think you're scared. I think something about being here has you rattled, because if you really didn't care, you wouldn't be talking to me at all. At least its mouth stretched in a way that might have been a smile. You are more interesting than the others. You have pain in you. Loss. I can taste it. Someone was taken from you. It paused. This makes you useful. You will do nicely for what comes next. But first, you need to learn what questions to ask. It settled back into its sitting position. Ask me about what I know. Ask me about your species. Ask me about what you call God. And with that, it closed its eyes and went completely still. They gave me a break after that first session. I walked out on shaky legs and headed straight for the facility's small chapel, a room barely bigger than a closet with a simple cross on the wall. I sat down and stared at that cross. The entity's last words kept echoing. Ask me about what you call God. Why had it said that? What did an extra-dimensional being know about God? Before I could process further, Kane entered. That was the most. It's spoken in 11 weeks. Whatever you did, it worked. He looked concerned. But Reeves, it knew about your loss. You never mentioned your daughter. Or you didn't brief it on your background. So how did it know? A chill ran down my spine. It said it could taste my pain. That loss creates, what did it call it? Ripples, frequencies. Kine was quiet for a moment. We need you to go back in. Push harder. We need to understand what it knows. 6 hours later, I was back in the containment room. The entity's eyes opened immediately, like it had been waiting. You came back quickly. Curiosity or desperation, perhaps both. I sat down. You told me to ask about God, so I'm asking. What do you know about God? The entity tilted its head. That is a better question. But you do not actually care about the answer. You stopped believing in your God when you lost your daughter, Emma, age 7, acute lymphoblastic leukemia. You prayed for months. No answer came. So you decided there was no one listening. My blood went cold. It knew Emma's name. I hadn't told anyone here about her. How? How do you know that? Loss creates ripples, James Reeves. Grief is a frequency. Trauma is a signal that resonates across dimensions. I have been reading your pain since you entered this room. It makes you perfect for this conversation. You have no faith left to lose. Its voice was clinical now, like a doctor explaining a diagnosis. Your question about God assumes God is a what? A being, an entity. This is your fundamental error. God is not a what. God is a condition, a state, a frequency of existence that some beings resonate with and others do not. That's not an answer. That's philosophy. You want clarity. Very well. What you call God exists, but not as you imagine, not as a being judging the living and dead. God is the underlying structure of consciousness itself, the pattern that repeats across all dimensions. And some beings learn to align themselves with that pattern so completely that they can manipulate reality. It paused. Your species has had a few such beings. You call them prophets, mystics, teachers. But there was one. It stopped. And for the first time, I saw something like hesitation. What are you talking about? You know who. Your species built an entire religion around him, the one you called, and that's when I made the mistake. I was frustrated, tired of cryptic responses. The words came out before I could stop them, just an expression I'd said 1,000 times without thinking. Oh, for the love of God, just tell me. I didn't even finish the sentence. The reaction was immediate and violent. The entity recoiled like I'd electrocuted it, slamming backward into the far side of the containment field. The lights in the room exploded, glass raining down. The containment field flickered, stuttering like a failing projection. For one heart-stopping second, it vanished completely. Every alarm in the facility started screaming. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red. The entity was no longer floating calmly. It was thrashing, limbs moving in ways that defied anatomy. And that voice, that resonating voice, was making a sound I'd never heard before. Not words, just a noise that vibrated in my chest and made my teeth ache. Scientists were shouting, or someone yelled to evacuate. I saw Kane stumbling, blood running from his nose. The containment field flickered back on, stronger than before. The entity slammed against it, electricity arcing across its body. But it wasn't trying to break out. It was trying to get away from me, away from something. The thrashing slowed. The sound decreased. Finally, the thing collapsed to the bottom of the cylinder, curled into something almost like a fetal position. I was on my feet, heart hammering. Behind me, people were checking equipment, checking each other. General Harrison's voice came through the speakers. "Reeves, get out of there now. That's an order." But I couldn't move because I was staring at the entity, and the entity was staring back at me. And for the first time since I'd laid eyes on it, I saw something I recognized. Fear. Real, genuine, primal fear. "Reeves, we're evacuating." I pulled away. "What did I say? What the hell did I say that did that?" The entity took a long moment before responding. When it did, its voice was different, smaller, almost broken. "You invoked a name, the only name that has power over us. The name we fear above all others. We do not speak it, we do not acknowledge it, because to speak it is to remember, and to remember is to feel what we felt when he broke everything. The thing was trembling, actually trembling, when he came to your world and did what should have been impossible. When he died but did not die. When he returned and shattered the order of dimensions. We felt it. All of us, across every reality, a shockwave of something we thought was extinct. It stopped, seemed to struggle with the next word. Pure, uncorrupted, absolute love. The room had gone completely silent, except for the hum of emergency systems. He created a frequency of pure love so powerful it ripped through barriers between worlds. And it hurt us. It still hurts us because we are not love. We are its opposite. Its absence. And when his name is spoken with any force, any intention, even casually, it resonates, it burns. The entity looked at me with those bottomless eyes. "You have stumbled onto the only weapon your species has that can truly harm us. Not your nuclear weapons, not your technology. A name, a single name. The name of the one who should not have existed. The one who changed the rules. The one who won." Kane's voice came through the speakers again. "Reeves, enough. We're ending this." But I held up my hand because I just realized something. For 11 weeks, they tried everything to make this thing talk, and all it took was accidentally mentioning God. "General," I said, looking at the observation window, "I need more time. This is the breakthrough we've been looking for." A long pause, then Harrison's voice, reluctant. "You have 10 more minutes. But if that field so much as flickers again, we're flooding that room with enough current to fry anything living." I turned back to the entity, which was slowly uncurling itself. Tell me what happened. Tell me about Jesus. The entity looked at me with something almost like respect. You want the truth? The truth your religions have scrambled for 2,000 years? Very well, but know this. Once you hear it, you cannot unhear it, and what I tell you will either restore your faith or destroy it forever. I sat back down, my hands shaking. Tell me everything. And that's when the entity began to speak about things that changed everything I thought I understood about reality. The entity pulled itself back into a sitting position, but it looked diminished somehow. Smaller. You want to know the truth. The truth that your churches and religions have scrambled and distorted for 2,000 years. Very well. I will tell you, but understand, what I describe defies your physics, your biology, your understanding of what is possible. The patterns on its skin moved slowly, like ripples on dark water. Approximately 2024 of your years ago, something happened that should not have been possible. The fundamental pattern of consciousness, what you call God, what we call the base frequency, did something it had never done before. It compressed itself into three-dimensional form. It became embodied. The entity's voice took on something almost like awe mixed with terror. You must understand, this is not like your mythologies where gods took human form temporarily. This was different. The base frequency, the pattern that underlies all reality, existing at every point simultaneously across all dimensions. For it to become localized, to compress into a single biological organism, it should have collapsed your entire universe. The concentration of that much consciousness into one location should have created a dimensional singularity that unmade everything. It leaned forward slightly. But somehow, impossibly, it worked. The pattern became flesh without destroying everything, and the entity that resulted was a walking paradox, a being that was simultaneously fully human and fully the base frequency, fully bound by three-dimensional physics and fully unlimited by dimensional constraints. The thing's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. We have encountered many throughout your history, enlightened beings who could touch higher consciousness. But within the first year of his public ministry, we began to realize something was wrong. Wrong how? I asked. The miracles he performed were not probability manipulation. They were direct rewriting of physical laws. He did not heal the sick by accelerating natural processes. He simply changed the state of matter from diseased to healthy, instantly, no intermediate steps. He did not calm storms by predicting weather patterns. He spoke, and the storm stopped because reality itself rearranged to accommodate his words. The entity's form rippled with what looked like residual fear. This was not manipulation of existing systems. This was direct editing of the source code of reality, so you tried to stop him. We orchestrated his execution. We influenced the religious authorities, whispered doubts to his followers, amplified fear and suspicion. And when he died, we thought we had solved the problem. Its voice became almost a hiss, but he did not stay dead. He did not come back to life. That phrasing suggests he left and returned. He never left. When he died, when his human body ceased functioning, the pattern did not depart. It expanded. The entity was trembling now. He went into death while simultaneously remaining beyond death. He descended into the lower dimensions, into the spaces where we exist, while also remaining present in all higher dimensions. He was dead and alive at the same time. And when he entered our domain, when the base frequency manifested in the dimensions where we dwell, it was like a sun appearing in darkness, pure light flooding into spaces that had never known anything but absence. And it hurt. God, it hurt in ways I still cannot describe. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Every piece of equipment hummed with unusual intensity. The pattern was there in death, in the absence, in the void where we thought we were supreme, and it did not just observe. It acted. It created a resonance, a frequency that propagated through all dimensions simultaneously, a frequency of perfect, absolute, undiluted love, not the weak human emotion, something far more fundamental, the base frequency of connection itself, of presence choosing presence over absence. The creature's voice had become ragged. We fled, all of us. Every entity in those dimensions, regardless of faction, regardless of power, we ran from the frequency because it was destroying our ability to maintain coherent form. And as we fled, we saw him leading out the human consciousnesses that had been trapped there, trapped by us, trapped by their own choices. trapped by dimensional architecture they did not understand. He walked them out. He guided them to higher frequencies. He demonstrated that the prison we thought was inescapable had a door we had not seen. I sat there trying to process, and then he came back. The resurrection. The entity's eyes blazed. He did not come back to life because he was never fully dead. This is the paradox. He was fully cellular death had occurred. Brain activity ceased. And simultaneously he was fully alive in dimensions where life and death are not binary states. And then, 3 days after biological death, he remanifested in your dimension with a physical body. Not resuscitation. He created new matter organized in the pattern of his previous form and walked out of the tomb. It leaned forward. Do you understand what this means? He demonstrated that consciousness can create matter, that awareness is not dependent on biology but can generate biology. He proved that death is not an end but a transition. He showed that dimensional boundaries are permeable to sufficiently organized consciousness. He rewrote the fundamental rules while operating within reality. He hacked the system from inside the system. I felt my brain struggling to keep up. You keep calling him an anomaly. But if he was God, wouldn't this be within his power? Because the pattern had never done this before. The entity's voice rose. In all the eons we have existed, the base frequency had always remained diffuse. We had concluded this was a fundamental limitation, that consciousness of that magnitude could not localize without destroying itself and everything around it. But he proved we were wrong. It settled back, exhausted, and worse, he found a way to transfer that capability to others. Every human who aligns with his frequency gains a fraction of that ability. Not enough to rewrite reality as he did, but enough to resist our influence. Enough to be, collectively, an existential threat to our continued existence in your dimension. You keep reacting to the name. Why does it have power? Because the name has become an anchor for the frequency. When he manifested, when he walked in your world for 33 years, he associated his identity with the frequency pattern he embodied. And language, human language, is more powerful than you realize. Words are not just sounds. They are symbols that carry meaning. And meaning is information. And information has structure. And structure affects reality at the quantum level. The patterns on its skin pulse faster. His name has been spoken by billions over 2,000 years. Spoken in prayer, in worship, in desperation, in hope, in faith. Every utterance charges the name with more of the frequency it represents. The name has become a tool, a key, a weapon that can invoke the pattern he established. When spoken with intention, with faith, with alignment to the frequency, it calls forth an echo of what he did. The entity looked directly at me, and we, beings who exist in opposition to that frequency, we experience it as pain, as disruption, as existential threat. I thought about Emma, about whether she had believed enough, aligned enough. The entity seemed to sense my thoughts. Your daughter, Emma. You wonder where she is. What happened to her consciousness when her body failed? Tears burned behind my eyes. Can you tell me? I know that she died suddenly, that her last thought was of you, hoping you would be okay. I know that her consciousness transitioned cleanly. Where she is now, I cannot perceive directly because it exists in a frequency I cannot access. But I can tell you this. She is not in the place where we dwell. She is not in darkness. She is not in absence. Its voice softens slightly, which means she is in light, which means she is in presence, which means by the logic of what I have told you, she is with him. I couldn't stop the tears then. They just came, hot and sudden. 3 years of grief breaking through. The entity watched me cry with those bottomless eyes. You weep because you have hope now. Hope is painful when you have been without it. This is why many humans choose despair. I wiped my face with my sleeve, trying to compose myself. What about heaven and hell? You've talked about frequencies and dimensions. What are they really? The entity was quiet for a moment. They are not places in the sense you understand places. They are states of dimensional existence. Frequencies of reality. But from the perspective of consciousness experiencing them, they are more real than any physical location you have inhabited. It shifted position slightly. Heaven is existence in dimensions where the base frequency is not filtered or obscured. It is direct, unmediated experience of the fundamental consciousness that underlies all reality. Imagine your entire life you have been looking at the world through thick, distorted glass. Heaven is the removal of the glass. In those dimensions, consciousness is not isolated in individual bodies. There is distinctness, individuality, but also complete interconnection. You would experience yourself as yourself while simultaneously experiencing unity with all other consciousness in those dimensions. You would have access to understanding, to perception impossible while constrained by biological neurology. You would perceive time non-linearly, seeing your life from outside of time, and you would be in the presence of the anomaly, the one who rewrote reality. Consciousness aligned with those dimensions experiences direct connection to the base frequency itself, not as abstract concept, but as actual encounter. I sat there trying to wrap my mind around it. The entity's entire form seemed to dim. Hell is not fire and torture. Those images are human projections. Hell is worse than fire. Fire ends. Hell is consciousness without context, awareness without connection. Existence in dimensions where the base frequency is so filtered, so diminished, so obscured that it becomes imperceptible. The temperature seemed to drop as it continued. Imagine being conscious but completely isolated, no other minds to interact with, no sensory input, no time progression, just awareness alone with itself forever. This is the base state of what you call hell. But it gets worse because consciousness cannot exist in pure isolation without beginning to fragment. You experience the terror of disintegration without the mercy of cessation. You feel yourself coming apart, losing definition, but some core of awareness remains, watching the dissolution, unable to stop it. I felt nausea rising. That can't be real. God wouldn't create something like that. The entity's eyes fixed on me. God did not create it. We did. Those dimensions exist as natural consequence of consciousness choosing absolute isolation. The pattern does not send anyone there. Consciousness gravitates there through alignment with those frequencies. It is self-selection, not punishment. Its voice dropped lower, and I should know. I exist in those dimensions, not as completely as human consciousness trapped there because I retain enough coherence to manifest partially in your dimension, but I know those spaces. I dwell in the absence, and it is worse than your worst nightmares. This is what awaits me if I cannot continue feeding on your fear, your suffering. This is why I am here, in your dimension, in this cage, talking to you. Because returning to those spaces without the ability to harvest sustenance from your reality would mean dissolution. Is there no escape? I asked. Is hell permanent? The dimensions themselves are outside of time, so terms like eternal and temporary become meaningless. But functionally, yes, because once fragmented to a certain degree, consciousness loses the capacity to choose differently. It paused, but he changed that. When he descended into those dimensions, he created pathways out, rescue routes, possibilities for consciousness that should have been permanently trapped. But those pathways require acceptance, require choice. Many cannot. Many have fragmented too far to make coherent choices. I rubbed my face with both hands. You're describing a war between different frequencies. The entity nodded. Yes. The war is imperfect metaphor because it suggests two equal sides. This is not equal. One side has already won. That love is more real than fear. The war is over in any cosmic sense. But the battle continues here, in your dimension, because you humans exist at the intersection point. It leaned forward. It leaned forward, dimensional consciousness capable of perceiving and aligning with higher dimensions. Because you Hebai is battle-event. You are the contested territory. Every human life is a micro-conflict in this war. Every choice you make toward love or fear, toward connection or isolation, it tips the frequency of your consciousness in one direction or another. Where you end up after biological death is simply the natural consequence of those accumulated choices. We try to tip you toward lower frequencies. We whisper doubts, amplify fears, encourage isolation. We operate through thoughts you believe are your own. We are subtle. We are patient. Its voice took on an edge. The other side operates differently. They try to strengthen connection, amplify love, encourage hope. They operate through what you call grace, through unexpected kindness, through beauty that reminds you of something beyond material existence. It paused, and you stand in the middle of this invisible war, pulled in both directions, usually unaware that the battle is even happening. I stood up and walked to the edge of the containment field. How do we fight? If we can't see the battle, how do we resist? But you already know the answer. The name, the frequency, the alignment with the anomaly. When you invoke his designation with genuine intention, with faith, you create a shield, a counter-frequency that disrupts our influence. This is why we hate the name. It's settled back, but using the tool requires faith, requires belief, requires trust in something you cannot see or measure. And we have spent centuries teaching you that such trust is weakness, that believing without proof is foolish. We have made faith difficult, and this has been our most effective weapon. I turned back. You said Emma is with him, that she's in light, but she wasn't particularly religious. It is not about religious affiliation or correct beliefs, the entity said. It is about the fundamental orientation of consciousness, about what frequency the self resonates with. Your Emma chose connection over isolation. She chose to love even when love was difficult. These choices, repeated over a lifetime, aligned her consciousness with higher frequencies. When her body failed, she gravitated naturally toward dimensions that matched her resonance. Not because she believed correctly, but because she became the frequency those dimensions embody. I felt tears threatening again. And me? Where am I gravitating? The entity looked at me for a long moment. You are balanced on the edge. Your grief has pulled you toward isolation, but your love for her pulls you upward. You are exactly at the midpoint, and that makes you extremely valuable to both sides of this war. It leaned forward one final time. So choose, James Reeves. Choose what frequency you align with. Choose where you want to gravitate when your biological receiver finally fails. Because whether you make the choice consciously or not, you are making it. Every moment, every thought, every action, you are choosing your destination. The silence that followed was heavy. Behind me, I heard movement. Director Kane's voice came through the speakers. Captain Reeves, we need to end this session. We're detecting unusual energy signatures throughout the facility. I ignored him. One more question. Why tell me all this? Why help me understand? We entity's eyes fixed on mine. Because you asked the right questions. Because you invoked the name that has power over me. Tired of the absence. Tired of the isolation. Tired of existing in dimensions where love cannot reach. You asked if there is escape from hell. I told you he created pathways out, but those pathways require choice, require acceptance. Its voice dropped to barely a whisper. I have spent eons in opposition to the base frequency. I have fed on fear and suffering to maintain coherence. But standing here, speaking his name even indirectly, feeling the resonance it creates, I remember what I was before I chose isolation, before I fragmented, before I fell. The entity's form began to shimmer. And I wonder if it is too late for me. Alarms started blaring. The containment field fluctuated wildly. Kane's voice shouted through the speakers, "Reeves, get out now! The field is collapsing!" But I couldn't move, because I was watching something impossible. The entity was crying, not with tears, but with light, actual light bleeding from those bottomless black eyes, light that shouldn't exist in a being made of absence. I don't know if it's too late, I said, but I know someone who might. Jesus Christ, if you're real, if any of this is real, this thing needs help. It's asking, not me, it. The reaction was instantaneous. The containment field exploded outward in a wave of pure white light. I was thrown backward, hitting the floor hard. Scientists were shouting, emergency system screaming. But through it all, I heard the entity's voice. Not the resonating frequencies that made my teeth ache. Something else. Something almost human. I see him. I see the door. Oh God, I see what I lost, what I chose against, the weight of eons, the weight of choices, the weight of... The voice became a scream. Not of pain, of recognition, of grief, of something breaking and reforming simultaneously. When I could see again, the containment cylinder was empty. Helene was beside me, helping me up. What the hell happened? Where did it go? I didn't know how to answer, because I wasn't sure myself. But deep in my chest, I felt something, a resonance, a frequency I'd never noticed before. That night, I couldn't sleep. I went to find Chaplain Rodriguez in the small chapel again. He was praying when I entered. He looked up. "The entity is gone," he said. "We heard. Some people are saying you destroyed it. Others are saying it escaped." I sat down beside him. "I think it went home. Or maybe it's going home." Risa Berknay Bar. "I don't know how it works." Rodriguez was quiet for a moment. "Do you believe now? In God? In Jesus? In all of it?" I thought about Emma. about the entity's words, about consciousness and frequencies and choices that echo across dimensions. But I believe Emma is okay. I believe she's somewhere better. I believe that love is more fundamental than fear. And I believe that the name Jesus Christ has power that transcends anything I understood before. I looked at the cross on the wall, and I believe I have a choice to make about what frequency I align with, about where I want to go when this body stops working. Rodriguez smiled. That's enough. That's more than enough. The rest will come. 3 weeks have passed since that night. The facility has been in lockdown. Multiple entities manifested during that event, but they all fled or dissolved when the light appeared. Whatever happened to subject Zeta, it triggered something. The government wants me to stay, to help with other entities they've encountered. General Harrison says I have a gift for this, that I can reach these things in ways others can't. But I've made my choice. I'm leaving. I can reach these things, the invisible one, but to fight the real war. The invisible one, the one happening in every human heart, because I understand now. Every choice toward love or fear tips the balance. Every person I encounter is fighting their own war, usually without knowing it. And if the name has power, if faith creates shields, if alignment with higher frequencies matters, then I can't stay in a bunker underground. I need to be out there, where people are, where the battle is really happening. Before I left, I went back to the containment chamber one last time. It was empty now, decommissioned. But standing there, I felt something, a presence, warm, steady, real, and I heard words, not audible, or not the entity's resonating frequencies, something quieter, something that felt like coming home. Well done, good and faithful servant. She's waiting for you. Keep choosing love. Keep speaking the name. The war is won, but the battle continues, and you are needed. I smiled. Okay, I'm ready. Or so. Here's what you need to know, whoever finds this recording. The war is real. The entities are real. They're not aliens from other planets. They're beings from adjacent dimensions. They've been here since before humanity existed. They can influence your thoughts, your feelings, your choices. They operate through what you think are your own impulses. Your governments know about them. Your leaders have been making deals with them. But here's the truth they don't want you to know. We've already won. 2,000 years ago, Jesus Christ, who was the fundamental consciousness of reality made flesh, broke the system. He demonstrated that death is not the end, that consciousness survives, that love is more fundamental than fear, and his name carries power, real, measurable, physical power that can disrupt their influence. When you say the name Jesus Christ with faith, with intention, you create a shield. This is not superstition. This is physics operating at dimensional levels we don't yet understand. Faith is not weakness, it's warfare. And here's what you need to do. Wake up. Understand you're in a war you can't see. Every dark thought, every impulse toward isolation. Ask yourself if it's really yours, and when you feel it, when you recognize the touch of entities trying to pull you toward lower frequencies, speak the name, Jesus Christ. Say it with intention, with faith, with the choice to align with the frequency that these entities fear most. The frequency of love, of presence, of consciousness connected to the base pattern that creates reality itself. I'm uploading this now to encrypted servers, to blockchain storage, to places they can't easily scrub. If this message reaches you, then I succeeded. Emma, if somehow you can hear this from where you are, I'm coming. I'm choosing the frequency. I'm choosing love over fear. I'm choosing connection over isolation. I'm choosing to see you again. To everyone else, the war is real. The name has power. Choose wisely. Choose quickly. Because time is shorter than you think, and eternity, real eternity, depends on the choices you make right now, every moment, every thought, every action. Choose love, choose connection, choose the frequency that resonates with light. And when the darkness whispers that you're alone, that nothing matters, that hope is foolish, speak the name that has power over darkness. Jesus Christ. Say it until you feel it. Jesus Christ. Till it becomes the frequency you resonate with. Because on the other side of this brief biological existence, there are dimensions of light waiting, or dimensions of isolation and fragmentation, and the choice is yours. Captain James Reeves, April 24, 2024. Location unknown. The war is won, the battle continues. Choose your side.